You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
You're listening to No Huddle Radio on the Packers Talk Radio Network, your home for in-depth and thoughtful Packers analysis. I'm your host, Gil Martin. My co-host is my good friend, Sean Tehan. In addition to this show, I write for the PackersPost.com and Cheesehead TV, and Sean was a TV sportscaster in Minnesota. We're here to talk Packers because you're all here for one thing, and that's a love for Green Bay football. Sean, day 2 of the draft is in the books. You are in Green Bay as we speak, leaving the facility. But before we get into day 2, how about a word from our sponsor?
Yeah, word from our sponsor. That's theticketking.com, Wisconsin's own Ticket King. Good place for Packers tickets, Bucks tickets, Brewers tickets. Hey, the Bucks, they're back in the series against the Indiana Pacers. They won Game 3 on Friday evening, same time as day 2 of the draft. The Milwaukee Brewers, hey, it's a little bit of a rough start to the year, but they're getting things going again. And, of course, Summerfest tickets, too. TheTicketKing.com. If you're following this on YouTube, thank you so much. Hit the bell, turn the notifications on while you're here. You can see the link right there on your screen, TheTicketKing.com. And Gil, I'm coming to you now. I'm away from the Lambeau grounds now. I'm coming to you from a parking garage nearby. And so if the service, if I'm going in and out, I apologize in advance, but I'm ready to talk draft, whether it's on a plane, in the air, in my house, in a parking garage. I'm here to talk Packer football, Gil.
I have to appreciate that, and it is great to talk Packer football. And I got to say, if there's a theme out there, this was a day full of surprises because I don't think either of the players the Packers picked were being discussed all that much by fans coming into even day 2 of this draft.
That's why that's essentially why teams don't advertise what their board looks like. You know, it's like they're not putting it in front of a press conference. Be like, yep, these are the guys we want to pick, because you don't really know what every team is thinking and every GM is thinking. So the Packers drafting Anthony Belton in round 2, a big dude on the O-line from NC State. 6'6", 336 pounds. A guy who the Packers, it sounds like, feel could play tackle and guard, which when you hear that, when you think of their the positional versatility that Belton could bring to the front lines, it makes sense that he's a Packer. So after that pick was made, essentially, my buddies and I just thinking, this is a total Packer pick. Yeah. This makes a ton of sense.
I love the fact that he's so big and so strong. His nickname is Escalade. So
heck yeah, man. Heck yeah.
So
I love that.
Yeah, I love that. And, you know, the thing about this pick, to me, it reinforces the fact that the Packers want to be a physical running football team. This is, you know, a guy who's going to move people. That is his biggest strength. Not fast, but has good footwork, and he can just push people out of the way. And I think he's going to be a very good friend to a certain Mr. Josh Jacobs.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. The Packers, they are going all in on the power running game on offense. Yep. They really are. Josh Jacobs is a tremendous runner. We talked about how many times where something I love about Josh Jacobs is that he has an ability to turn what seems like nothing into a few yards. And it's better than nothing. And he just always seems to be falling forward. And now you got some horses in front who are going to be able to help move some guys on the other side, where the Aaron Banks edition in the offseason, it was a bit of a puzzling signing on paper, but the dude can move some people. He has familiarity with the Packers offensive scheme, being in San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan the last few years. And now Anthony Belton is a guy who just I feel like you could maybe pop in at right guard. And this is a sneaky, and Gil, I believe you wrote about this too, where this is a sneaky position group where the Packers had to be thinking about the future, because you have the impending free agencies coming up for Sheet Walker, Zach Tom, and Sean Ryan. You're not going to be able to keep all those guys. Those guys are good NFL starters, and hopefully they could keep 2 of those guys, but the Packers are preparing for, if they lose at least 2 of those guys, they're going to be okay maybe in 2026 and beyond.
Yeah, and then you add Jordan Morgan to the mix, and all of a sudden the offensive line, where you were saying before this draft, do we have enough depth?
Yeah.
All of a sudden you've got, especially if Belton can play guard, you've got depth all of a sudden, and you're not relying, and no offense to, Kadeem Telford and Glover, Travis Glover, they're still developing. But, do I want them starting if somebody gets injured right now? They haven't proven it yet. Now, they still may, but all of a sudden, the question mark that the offensive line had depth-wise, it's a lot smaller now.
The beauty of this pick is that Anthony Belton doesn't need to play right away. Correct. This is a move for 2026, and it is perfectly fine. I really feel like, and I feel like we touched on this last night, Gil, after the Matthew Golden selection, where with the injury to Christian Watson at the end of last season, you felt like receiver, finding a guy who could fill in and be a starter at receiver was maybe the biggest need, like day one need right away for the Packers. But outside of that, and even Brian Gutekunst has said, where they're not in a position where there's not a lot of positions where they're like, we need a guy to fill that spot right now. We need to find that guy in the draft. And that's a big benefit. And Anthony Belton, this is purely for the future. And if he gets in the lab, and Brian Gutekunst has a very good track record of drafting offensive linemen since he's been a GM. So if he feels good about this and his scouting department feels good about this, you can't help but feel positive about this as well.
Absolutely. And look, like any player coming out of college, he's got some things he needs to work on. His hand technique, his placement needs to get a little bit better. He has to cut down a little on the penalties. He had 8 penalties in each of his 3 years as a starter in college. Even got ejected from a game last September for spitting on an opponent. But you know what? A little maturity, I can handle that if he grows into that. But it shows he's got a mean streak. He's a competitor. And if you harness that the right way, that can be a big benefit.
Remember the first couple of years in the Matt LaFleur era, they lost to San Francisco in the NFC Championship. They lost to Tampa in the NFC Championship. And they lost to both those teams twice in the same season in each of those seasons. And you know what the big criticism of the Packers was?
They were soft.
They were soft and they were not physical enough. Well, guess what? They're making sure they're getting guys, like you said, who have a mean streak. So this is what Packer fans, I feel like, have kind of wanted from the line, from the offensive lineman, from the defensive lineman. It's just more physicality. So if you feel like that this guy is just going to bring an extra layer of toughness to this team, it's awesome. And I know there's a lot of consensus mock drafts out there that didn't have Anthony Belton as a round 2 pick, maybe round 3 or 4 pick. But again, we don't know what an NFL GM is thinking. They have way more data than we do. But initially, and I was there obviously for the draft tonight for day 2, and Packer fans are kind of like, oh, all right. It wasn't a big roar of excitement like it was for Matthew Golden on Thursday.
Right.
But when everyone was kind of like, I think people were kind of hoping for maybe a sexier pick there. That's just kind of the way the draft goes. But again, it's like, it just felt like a very Packersy pick.
It does. And look, again, like you said, he doesn't have to play right away. Let's see what he can do. He'll probably play special teams as a rookie. Maybe, depending on what he shows in training camp and in preseason, maybe they rotate him in a few series like they did with Sean Ryan, like they did with Jordan Morgan before he got hurt. And then you grow and hopefully he's ready to go as a starter in year 2. But I like the use of this pick for an offensive lineman, and now it's a question of seeing how well he pans out.
And how much the offensive line got dominated and how much it was a problem when Elton Jenkins left that playoff game against Philly. Brian Gutekunst is making sure there's enough resources there this time where if they lose a guy that they're going to be covered, because the Packers offensive line was relatively healthy last season. Outside of Jordan Morgan, their starting 5 played a lot of ball together last year, but one guy went out and the dominoes fell, and it was a disaster on offense in that game. But that's what you look at, that Philly game, that playoff game in Philly against the eventual Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, and the round 3 pick kind of made a little more sense. And after the Christian Watson injury and the struggles at the end of the year from the receivers, the drops from Dontavian Wicks and Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs having concussion issues, which is something to definitely monitor because that's a scary situation. You don't want to mess with the head. You don't want to mess with concussions. That's a problem. So the Packers draft Savion Williams in round 3, another wide receiver. Gil, this was a surprise, but then you look at the measurables of this guy and you're just like, okay, I get it.
Oh, you could, once you read the measurables, you could see right away why this guy is a Brian Gutekunst type. He is an elite athlete. He's got great size, great speed. And, I looked at this pick. It did surprise me. I don't think anyone was expecting Savion Williams to be selected.
Mm-hmm.
But here is a guy who in college lined up as a wide receiver, lined up as a running back, played quarterback in the Wildcat, completed all 3 passes he attempted. Here is a guy who, I don't even know if I would call him a wide receiver as much as I would call him an athletic weapon on offense.
Yeah, he's a giant dude, man. 6'4", 220 pounds, and ran a 4.48, I believe, 40-yard time. And a guy that I think a lot of Packer fans would be like, okay, we'd be cool with maybe getting this guy. But the fact that they got 2 receivers, I think that says a lot. Well, I think Savion Williams sounds like a guy that Brian Gutekunst really wanted and didn't think would be available. And it's surprising the Packers haven't traded at all in the first 2 days of the draft, but it sounds like the board has fallen the way they want, and they're getting guys who they want. And it sounds like Savion Williams is someone who they maybe didn't expect to be there in round 3, and he was a big physical freak. Now, the thing is, his hands are a bit of an issue. His hands are a bit of a problem. They were at TCU. I don't know if that's a TCU thing because remember, was it Johnston, the Chargers wide receiver who was drafted in round 1, Quentin
Right.
Johnston? His issue was hands as well, and he went to TCU, same school. And I love the little anecdote that Savion Williams hosted now teammate Matthew Golden when Matthew Golden was on a college visit in high school to TCU, and Savion Williams hosted Matthew Golden. So you got some familiarity there too. I'm interested to see where we're going to have a lot of competition in camp at the wide receiver group. It's going to be a very interesting summer coming up in Green Bay.
I totally can see Matt LaFleur scheming up packages for Savion Williams, whether it's jet sweeps, reverses, screen passes, draws, option passes. I just can see LaFleur having a lot of fun figuring out how to play with this new toy, in his offense. And he may only touch the ball 5 or 6 times a game, but 1 or 2 of them could be high impact plays. And I just love the versatility that he can bring. And he also, he was a captain in college. He's married. He has a daughter who unfortunately was born with a heart defect, had to go through surgery to repair it. He seems like a very mature young man who really got better in each of his years in college. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he could do. But here's the other thing that I see from the fact that the Packers took 2 receivers in the first 3 rounds of this draft. We know Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs are in their contract year. The year after that, it's Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks in their contract year. They're not keeping all of those guys. And I also wonder now, does Mecole Hardman even make this team?
I was just about to bring that up, Gil, where how does this wide receiver group look coming out of training camp at the end of August, coming up later this year? Because, I think Brian Gutekunst is saying, and the Packers are saying, where they need to upgrade at wide receiver. And I think the golden pick was more so, it's like, okay, Christian Watson is such an important part of that offensive scheme in terms of helping the entire offense flow a lot better when he's out there. He stretches the field vertically. He's probably their most talented wide receiver, and you're not going to have him for more than the first half of the regular season coming up. So I understood the Matthew Golden pick, but then the Savion Williams pick is like, okay, they really feel like they need to bolster this wide receiver room. Because last year they took a step back. I think we all anticipated them to take a step forward because of how well they played together in Jordan Love's first year as the starter. And now it's a matter of like, hey, we need competition because some stuff that just isn't going to fly. I don't see Mecole Hardman making this team unless barring any kind of injury. I don't see him making this team now, but maybe there's a surprise move coming up still. We haven't really heard of any veterans getting traded on day 2, but there could be more trades coming up on day 3 in Green Bay, and maybe Romeo Doubs is floating in some trade talks. who knows? It could be a very interesting weekend coming up to wrap up the NFL draft for the Packers.
It very well could be, and you got to wonder though. Bo Melton, Malik Heath. Is there room for one of them, both of them, neither of them in this wide receiver room? And then the other question is this: do any of these guys who struggled last year take that leap forward? Because if you go back, Jordy Nelson, Devontae Adams, it was the end of year 3 when they really kind of established themselves.
Yeah.
So you have Wicks and Reed now in year 3, Watson once he returns, and Dobbs in year 4. How is that going to play out? Who's going to step up and claim their place on this team beyond this season? Because the competition, iron sharpens iron, right? So the competition is there. You want to stay a Green Bay Packer, earn it. And I hope that we get, one or two of these guys to step up, and maybe, your 2 rookies add something to the mix, hopefully more as the season goes on, and you see an upgrade in this receiver room.
Yeah, this is something where I think this is going to be the kick in the butt that this receiver room really needs. Because maybe, and this is something I thought about, Gil, where do you think this Packer receiver room, with how well they played the first year together, that they just got a little comfortable and they got a little settled where they're like, yeah, we're fine. We're good. We're on the right path. And they got too comfortable, and essentially they took a step back because of that. And that's the big question. And now it's just a matter of this is the Packers, or essentially letting these guys know, this is not good. This is not acceptable. We need to get better, and we're going to bring in some competition, and it's either rise up or you fall behind, plain and simple. And I love that.
I think that's part of it, but I think the other thing you have to remember, the growth of that receiver room was really the second half of 2023. Yeah. Jordan Love struggled early, and so did the receivers. They weren't running their routes properly. They had drops in the first half of the season. How many times did we see 2 or 3 receivers in the same part of the field when the ball was thrown there? And then around week 9 or week 10, right around that bye week in 2023, it's like the light went on for multiple players. Jordan Love, Dobbs, Watson got healthy again briefly. Reed really came on. All of a sudden, those receivers started to play better, and it coincided with Jordan Love playing better. So we have to see, who steps up, but year 3 is often the year where receivers get it, where the game slows down for them. We got to hope that, some of these receivers, we had 4 young guys before this. Now we add 2 more. You need 3 or 4 of them to be playing at a really high level. And the more, shots you have at the dartboard, the better chance you have of hitting on one.
Yeah. And also, I think this also helps validate what we think where the Packers, outside of another wide receiver in place of Christian Watson, they really don't have any immediate needs where they can pick the guys they feel are best on their boards and just let competition, let the competition happen, essentially, where this is a matter of hey, let's see if we can get better from within and have more quality depth, because it could be a very positive thing going. This could be a very positive thing going forward. I'm excited to see what this guy can do. A big guy. It's funny though, a big receiver with his issue being hands. It sounds like a bigger James Jones in a way to me, where it's just a guy who James Jones always made the most difficult catches, but he always dropped the most routine balls. Yeah. That seems to be the case also with Dontavian Wicks, and that seems to be the case with Christian Watson as well, throughout his career. But maybe this helps. I just hope this is good for the Packers receiver room. I really think it will be. I will say, Gil, as we transition to talking about day 2 of the draft as a whole, some big surprises were happening on day 2, or that there were some surprises that didn't even happen. But specifically for the Packers, I thought they would at least pick one defensive guy, especially on the D line today. Yep. That was a pretty big shocker on day 2.
It was. And, we heard, we know the whole situation with Jair and cornerback. And then we heard so many times, we want more pass rush from our defensive line, from the front four, whether it's off the edge, whether it's from the interior. And you were expecting one player at least to sort of step up and do that. And yet, didn't happen. And I expect interior defensive line, we've seen Brian Gutekunst do really well on day 3, adding, round 4, round 5, round 6 defensive tackles. But if you want an elite pass rushing person off the edge, you pretty much got to do it in the first couple of rounds. So I don't know if they'll really be able to do that upgrade. I think they're really going to count on Lucas Van Ness taking that year 3 leap.
DeMarcus Covington has a tall task ahead of him, the new defensive line coach.
Yes, he does.
I mean, they essentially are saying hey, and I think maybe you wonder where edge guys were falling off the board in round 2 before the Packers were on the clock, where Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College, who Jeff Hafley's very familiar with, he went before the Packers could get him. JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State was drafted by Indy. Nick Scourton from Texas A&M, he went off the board early in round 2. A lot of edge guys that you maybe think the Packers were hoping to possibly pick up in round 2 went flying off the board before they had a chance to go get them. And I think that was more of a situation there. But yeah, the Packers are essentially saying that Jason Brevovich didn't do a good enough job coaching the D-line last year. And Jeff Hafley, I don't think Jeff Hafley's a problem. I think Jeff Hafley's a darn good coach. I think we saw in flashes in spurts last year where the Packers pass rush was really good. Remember, this team was top 10 in sacks somehow last year. They were top 10 in sacks. They didn't even have a guy that had more than 7.5 sacks last year.
Right.
Rashawn Gary was the leader, and they were still a top 10 defense as well. Jeff Hafley's a good coach, and I thought he would maybe get a few more horses so far in this draft. And now we still have another day of picks to go. But and last year, remember on day 3, they got a starting safety in Evan Williams on that side of the ball, and they got some guys with some promising upside on that side of the ball. The draft is far from over. There's still time to add to that defense. But I'm surprised the Packers didn't add more today.
Yeah, I was surprised that all 3 picks were on the offensive side of the ball. I was also surprised that there were 2 wide receivers out of the first 3 picks. I thought they'd use one of them on a wide receiver, but I did not expect 2. And would it shock me if there's a day 3 wide receiver in round 6? No. I mean, it really would not. So, we'll see how that sort of all plays out. But I think there's a lot that we have to look forward to as far as day 3 is concerned. And first and foremost, I think if there's going to be a Jaire Alexander trade, day 3 is probably the time that it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's interesting because you would have thought the Packers, especially with the Jaire situation where it sounds like he's on the way out, 1 foot out the door essentially, that they would have definitely drafted a DB at least on the defensive side of the ball today. But is it possible that Jaire's just going to stay? Is it possible? I think if the situation, if the relationship between him and the Packers is broken beyond repair, he's going to get moved. I would think tomorrow or within the next few weeks. But if it's fixable and he's open to coming back and they can patch up the differences and everything like that, maybe Jaire's going to be back in Green Bay. And honestly, I'd be okay with that. The Packers aren't in a terrible cap situation. If he has another injury-riddled year coming up, they can get out of that contract pretty easy after this year coming up with very little repercussions. So at this point, why not? If the situation is, if there's a remote chance that it's fixable, just bring him back. Why not?
Well, we've heard Jordan Love say they want him to stay. What was it? Xavier McKinney was working with him. So
he followed Matthew Golden on Instagram.
And he followed Golden on Instagram. So it seems like there's some buzz that, indicates maybe, just maybe, he's not as out the door as we may have been led to believe just yet. But if a trade is going to happen, I think tomorrow or Saturday is the day that it's most likely to take place, because quite honestly, you're not getting a first or second or third round pick at this stage for Jaire based on his cap situation, his injury history, and everything else. So, maybe you get a fourth for him, or you move up in a round, or, grab an extra couple of picks on day 3. Maybe there's incentives that could make it a better pick next year also. But realistically, if it's going to happen, tomorrow is a big opportunity for it to happen. And then the other thing is you got to fortify defense. I mean, we alluded to it already, but I think the defensive line and cornerback still have to be addressed. And day 3 is when you address them. Now, if Jair stays, the need for a cornerback is a little less urgent, but there's going to be at least one cornerback, I think, drafted tomorrow. It just almost has to be.
For tomorrow, I would say, and I'm curious to hear who you want the Packers to target maybe on day 3, who's still on the board. Go get Ohio State defensive end Jack Sawyer. I know his testing wasn't great. I know a lot of scouts aren't really bullish on his upside and his testing and everything like that. But go at Jack Sawyer if you can tomorrow. Just add him. Why not? Because that dude had a knack for making the big play at Ohio State. He made one of the biggest plays maybe in Ohio State football history in that semifinal game against Texas in January to get to the national championship. He has a knack for making the big play. If I'm Green Bay tomorrow, if Jack Sawyer's on the board, you might as well pick that guy. Forget the measurables, watch the tape, and just see what he can add to your team.
Yeah, I would see that. We have late night alum saying Tonka Hemingway, please, on day 3. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I think that there'll be more defensive players. There will probably be another offensive lineman at some point. That would not surprise me. And do we see a day 3 quarterback, which just seems to be something that the Packers tend to want to do, as per Brian Gutekunst last year?
If Shedeur Sanders falls to round 6, and I know we were talking about this before we started recording, Gil, because it's crazy. I mean, Dylan Gabriel, I was there tonight all the way till the end of day 3. Dylan Gabriel getting drafted by Cleveland late in round 3 was shocking to a lot of people, where it's like, wow, Shedeur has fallen this far. People thought he was going to go. There was debate if he was going to go 9th overall. Him and Jackson Dart had similar odds to be the second quarterback off the board in the entire draft. And Shedeur hasn't even heard his name called. Do you consider drafting that guy if he's if round 6 comes and the Packers are on the clock and they haven't picked a quarterback yet, to just add to the quarterback room like Brian Gutekunst has said he has wanted to do? Do you consider drafting Shedeur Sanders?
If it's round 6 and he's still there, and keep in mind the Packers are picking late in round 6, not early. First of all, I'd be shocked. But second of all, I would have to consider it. But boy, am I concerned about the distraction that he would be in that locker room, the distraction his father could potentially be. Would he be content to sit behind Jordan Love and Malik Willis for a year? I mean, I don't think the Packers could stash him on the practice squad.
No.
They would have to keep him on the roster. So are you willing to do that? Or does that open up a trade for Malik Willis?
Yeah, I feel like it would be the Shedeur show every day training camp. I really do. And I think, and who knows, the NFL teams and people who get paid a lot more than we do to talk about football, they probably know more about what's going on with Shedeur Sanders and why nobody's want. And I think it's just because nobody wants a clown show. No one wants a circus at training camp and practices. And if you're a team that has a questionable situation at quarterback, as like any bad series that the starting quarterback has for that team, fans are gonna be like, "Where's Shedeur? We want Shedeur," and it's always gonna be about Shedeur. And I don't think Shedeur Sanders is a bad kid or anything like that. No. But just being Deion's kid, there's a lot of it, and Deion has created a lot of attention for Shedeur. He had his jersey number retired at Colorado, which is kind of a controversial thing where it's like, yeah, you put up good numbers, but what did he really do? Like Travis Hunter getting his number retired makes sense. Won the Heisman Trophy. No question about that. But Shedeur Sanders, that doesn't make sense. And I just think there's so much baggage, and it would essentially be inviting the circus to town every time that your team is practicing or playing, whatever it may be, because it would be all about Shedeur. And I don't think a team wants to deal with that. I don't think there's many teams who would want to deal with that. I do think the best fit with him would be if he were in a team where they have a veteran quarterback like the Rams with Matthew Stafford there, a guy who's going to be starting no matter what. If you bring him in to be Matthew Stafford's backup, I think McVay could handle that. I think that'd be very good for the Rams. But I don't know. I just don't think a lot of teams want to entertain that thought right now.
No, and I don't think he'll be there at the end of the 6th round either. But could you imagine Shedeur and Deion in Hollywood? I mean, could you imagine?
Jeez. Yeah, I mean, you think it'd only be a matter of time till Deion Sanders would take the UCLA job or the USC job just to be close to Shedeur, right? You know, it's an interesting situation. But so I mean, if he were available in round 6, the late round 6 pick that the Packers do have, I don't know if I would. I just don't know if I would. I would. Quinn Ewers is a guy where he was a former number 1 recruit, was a starting quarterback at Texas. He's a guy, or Will Howard from Ohio State. He's another guy where it's like, why not?
You know, it's like guys, I tell you.
Hey, Will Howard makes some big throws, Gil. Don't you diss Will Howard, man.
Hey,
he made some big plays, and he's
not against Michigan. He didn't.
No. Hey, we're not going to talk about that. That game didn't even happen, so it didn't even matter in the end. But with Will Howard, though, another guy, a big guy who's kind of built like Ben Roethlisberger. He's a big dude, and he made some big throws. And a guy who definitely needs to tweak some things, but that's what the Packers are looking for, is a guy who can come in, be coachable, and not be a distraction, and add to the quarterback room at the same time. So,
and you develop it. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, besides that, though, are there any other guys on the board that you're really looking that if he's available for the Packers tomorrow, would you be like, oh, please pick him?
At this point, it's more about positions than it is about players. In my mind, I want to see the defensive line, both interior and edge, fortified. We need a cornerback, another offensive lineman, that reserve quarterback, the developmental quarterback. The board is going to move so fast on Saturday.
Yes, it will.
You got to know who's still there. And again, the Packers are picking at the end of most of these rounds. So it's going to be fast and furious, and I'm looking forward to it too.
Yeah, and Gil, before we wrap up, because my voice is getting hoarse, I need to rest. I need to get some water in me real quick. What articles you got cooking online right now? Packers Post, Cheesehead TV. This is obviously such a busy stretch. This is the last super busy stretch, really, until training camp gets going. But it's a fun time.
Camp. You got OTAs.
And mini camp and OTAs, but it's like this is obviously a big time. This is a really important time and a really busy time. So what else you got cooking so far today?
Breaking down the draft. First 2 days of the draft for sure. Great coverage on Cheesehead. Great coverage on the Packers Post. Just 10 things that we learned on each day of the draft is really how I'm approaching it. And I'll do another one of those for day 3, and we'll break it down. So and then we'll start moving ahead and looking toward OTAs, different position battles, maybe some of the veterans whose job is in jeopardy now that the draft has come and gone. So lots to discuss here in this busy part of the off season.
I can't wait to see the Escalade in person and how he compares in size to the rest of the Packers offensive line, because if that dude towers, I remember Julius Peppers at training camp being head and shoulders just the biggest guy compared to everybody when he got to Green Bay. And I feel like it's like Anthony Belton could maybe be in that territory possibly. So who knows? But it's a lot of excitement. And so it's just it's been a fun few days. My legs are really tired. My dogs are barking right now, but I'm powering through. And it's been a really good showing in Green Bay. I think about 380,000 people have been at the draft so far in the first 2 days. So It's a heck of a turnout for small town Green Bay, Wisconsin. So it's pretty cool. But Gil, send us out, man. I'm ready to be done talking for the night.
Gee, I'm shocked.
Oh my goodness. Woo.
All right. That is so good for us. We'll be right back here next week. Follow us on Twitter at Gil Packers and at GBPackersSean to stay up to date on all things Packers or to ask us questions. Or you can email us at gbpackerssean@gmail.com. Make sure you're subscribed to Packers Talk on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And a big thanks to PackersTalk.com for powering our show. And thank you for listening. Until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.